Hi, my name is Shauna Baca. Welcome to the Fearless Society. This channel serves as an open discussion and forum on all topics mental health related. And today we have a very special guest, a Reverend Emma Molina-Ynequez, who is a healer, body worker, and reverend, and a medicine woman. Her and I actually worked together for years when I was trying to overcome some of my maladies of anxiety and basically trauma. So welcome, Reverend Emma. We're so excited to have you.
Well, thank you, Shauna. This is a delight. First of all, I want to thank you for the invitation. It's been years that we've worked together, but being chronicled in your book has brought us full circle. So I am so excited to be here and to share in this experiment.
Thank you. So I wrote a book, it's called Fearless, Conquering the Demons of Mental Purgatory, which chronicles a time in my life when I had turned 21. I became severely depressed, anxiety-ridden. My anxiety turned into a panic disorder, and then eventually turned into agoraphobia, where I didn't leave my house for over a year, except to go to the therapist once a week, which I had to be driven to. Now, at that point in time, I didn't have the tools, to really understand what was going on with me. So I relied a lot on Western medicine. But after over a year of not leaving my home, my indigenous mother thought that Western medicine had failed me and took me to the Paula Indian Reservation to see a medicine man. And I was cured that night inside a sweat lodge ceremony. So I have not had a panic attack since, and I don't want to give away my age, but it was a long time ago, so more than 2 decades ago. And but what happened was I had a lot of unresolved trauma, experiences in my childhood life from the differences of loss and my family dynamics. So one of the things that I worked on with Miss Emma here, who's amazing, is really healing the body, because even though I was cured, I still went to therapy to try to figure out what my triggers were. And although mentally I was able to kind of move past these insecurities, vulnerabilities, trauma, losses at a young age that I wasn't even aware of, and it took a lot of years of therapy to uncover that, I never realized how much is stored in the body. And Emma and I worked together, and she did this shamanic, vision questing body work on me of trauma that was still stored on a cellular level in my organs, emotional things. And I wanted her to talk a little bit about the process of how people store trauma inside their body and how it affects us on a physical and mental and spiritual level.
Yeah, it was very interesting because we started so long ago, and I've been in this industry, this healing modality, for 26 years. Wow. 26 years. So I was new and fresh during the time that you appeared at my office, on my table. And I think together, I love how the divine works, where it brings us together to, what is that saying about necessity is the creator or the inventor, or anyway. So she came in with all these thoughts, and thoughts are also transmuted and transferred into our bodies, because our bodies take the brunt of it, right? If we think something and it starts at the head, it has nowhere to go but in the body. So it's like a storage place. And I guess I was a pioneer, but you helped me become that, because I was tapping into some things at that time that I was experiencing with my own body. I had breast cancer, and I had a mom who died of it, a sister who passed away from it. And then it came at my doorstep, and I thought, okay, Lord, what am I going to do with this? Because I know it's a teacher. And so I went within. And I've always heard that if you go within, you never go without. So I too Went to a sweat lodge, and I learned so much during that time because I was seeking healing modalities. And at a sweat lodge, I remember sitting in the heat, and right before they open up the flaps so you can crawl out, if you've ever been to one, it's a whole different process that we can share with you later. But I heard this voice says, Emma, if you are only using 10% of your mind, where's your other 90? And it was in that moment where I thought, I'm sitting on it. It's in my body. So just imagine, even proportionally, if this is 10, isn't your body the other 90? So when you came to me, all this intelligence, not only from my mind and my body, but yours and your emotions, and how these emotions were causing, affecting our body, or affecting our fear, affecting our hearts and our souls. And to me, that's what cancer came to teach me, was that if I went within, I could heal. So I knew I wasn't the only one who had this intelligence, but I was the only one willing to sound a little out there.
New age spectrum.
Yeah, new age spectrum. But it felt right and it felt good. So when you came in, and there's a session we have, and there's a session in the book you talk about.
Yes.
That you started to see things, and all of a sudden I became this energy that was with you.
Yes.
I felt like, you know how they say, be that fly on the wall? If I could be a fly on the wall, I was more than a fly, but I could walk through your story with you, and now I felt you weren't alone, and you felt you weren't alone. And then from that came this guidance, and it was an internal guidance that came through me for you. And we ventured to some of these thoughts you were having that were affecting your body, your heart rate, your anxiety. I mean, we all go through these things, but I think that our bodies are so intelligent that they're always telling us something. For instance, when you're sleepy, you go to bed. When you're hungry, you eat. So what about the other emotional aspects of our being that are speaking to us constantly if we would only listen?
Yeah, I really think that that's important. We're really not taught to listen to our body. Mm-hmm. And we've had this conversation where, everybody wants to achieve and be happy. And when we're feeling good, we like that feeling, right? Which is like why addicts, we drink, or we use to achieve that feeling of that euphoric state. But there's the flip side of different emotions that we feel, that once I'm feeling bad, like if I wake up and I'm just like, I don't feel good, my energy's low, I don't know what's wrong with me. It's like, that's the immediate thought. I don't know what's wrong with me. Mm-hmm. Nothing's wrong with me. I'm having and feeling an emotion. And to be able to tap into that, the old me would have been trying to run away, hide, sweep it under the carpet because I have to be perfect. I have to be on. I have to fit this mold to fit in society. I can't show people that I'm not feeling well today, or I'm depressed, or I don't feel good. I have to be on. And I know, so the way I found Emma is because I was newly sober, and I was in a group of women called the Cinderella group, ironically. I know, the Cinderella, all the broken princesses, right? But, week after week, it's like this sisterhood, this camaraderie of all these women from the Cinderella group, and just, basically opening our hearts, wearing our hearts on our sleeve, talking about, our deepest, darkest fears. And then one day, one of the girls came in to the group, and she looked like she was glowing. She looked like, I don't know, it was weird. It was like if she had this invisible, almost golden aura around her and glow that I had never seen walking into these rooms. And I just stared at her the whole time, and I said, I'm going to go up to her afterwards because whatever she has going on, I want some of that, you know? And I did. And she's like, well, I saw this woman, her name is Emma, you know, I can give you her phone number. And I think that, like, you probably cured half of us, you know, who had this broken Cinderella princess kind of thing. It was just ironic that we were called Cinderella Group because what is, you know, these Disney-esque kind of stories teach us is that we're waiting for somebody else to come save us from ourselves. And so I started working with Emma, who took me specifically on Vision Quest. You know, Vision, and you were like the guided tour guide, like helping me kind of navigate through my body, my trapped emotions, to basically tell the arc and then paint the picture. So I could see that I went down the rabbit hole like most of the girls from the Cinderella group, and we're like, well, what's down the rabbit hole? What is in those bag of tricks, you know? So can you just talk to us a little bit about how you, like, I don't know how you did, I mean, you're amazing, and there's healers out there that can help people heal themselves from these traumas by having the, you know, you navigate as a guide and to spiritually help people enlighten, like, how, like, what is the process and something like that that's so not traditionally Western medicine, but more like spiritual and indigenous cultural faith-based spirituality.
Absolutely. Well, if you ladies, I didn't know that till right now, that you were the Cinderella group, then I must be your fairy godmother.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. You are the fairy godmother.
Only because I showed up right on time, or this synergy, this energy that brought you to my doorstep. As I said, I was just discovering this path and pioneering through this. But one of the things I've learned is when I close my eyes and I imagine an emotion, I don't just imagine it as a name. I don't imagine it just as a word. Lots of people come in, they want to be happy, but they have no idea what happiness is. So how can you want to be happy if you don't know what it is for you? So when I break it down and I'm listening attentively to what you're saying, and especially to your stories, I was never read to as a child. So when my clients come in, I feel like I'm there, like, tell me more. And I get intrigued by your storyline. But in the story, there's certain words that pop up. And people would always ask me if I was bilingual. And I was like, no, I'm actually like a wordsmith, because I'll see one word and I'll hear it in a slant. Like when people say, you know, that's totally impossible. And then my mind sees, I'm possible. If I hear the word ill, I-L-L, I see it, I hyphenated, L-L. Or that little colon, whatever that is. I will. So I get all excited when people come in and they have an illness. Sorry about that. But I am your go-to girl because I get excited for you. It's not a death sentence. It's not, you know, the doom or the gloom that we think it is, because by the time we're done, we're laughing in its face about how what we think can paralyze us. So when we bring it out into the open, and you bring it literally to the table, I'm being served. And together we're picking out those things that have terrified, had horrified, had petrified, had, paralyzed us. And even looking at those words to break them down. Sometimes I even hear them and say, for instance, I think in one of our journeys, a bear showed up for you.
Yes.
And if we were to all see a bear, we would be terrified because it looks bigger than us, right? But a bear has many meanings, and a bear can be your spirit guide, or it can be, and I had you stare in the face of the bear, not to be afraid of it, and then all of a sudden the bear started to shrink. So it's kind of like when we give emotions our power, that's where we get lost. But when we can talk about them, and this is the glory and this is the beauty, it's like a prayer. When you speak your vulnerability, when you speak your fear out, we don't take fear in because then it interferes.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I remember and recall that many of our sessions, and the one thing was the bear, and so in a guided meditation, she asked me to visualize that I was out in an open garden, and she said, without thinking about it, tell me what you see. And I said, I see a rabbit. And she said, what is the rabbit doing? I said, the rabbit is running. She said, follow the rabbit. So I start going down this trail through the woods, the beautiful woods, and I get to a part where it's an Indian burial ground, and I told her I can't go through it, and she said, no, walk around it to keep going, to follow this rabbit. And the rabbit ended up leading to a bear. And when I looked up, the bear saw me, and it stood up on its two legs, and it was towering over me. And I looked and I said, I'm so afraid, what do I do? And you said, I think you told me to hug it or something. And I said, I'm not gonna hug a bear, that bear is gonna kill me. And she said, no, just hug it. And when I hugged it, it literally got smaller, but it moved out of the way. And when it moved out of the way, there was a indigenous man in full regalia standing there. And he looked at me, and he called me. He didn't say with words, he just used the gesture, called me over. And as I approached closer to him, he stepped out of the way, and there was a woman there in full buckskin. She was an elder, and she had white hair. Kind of like, a little bit like you, but
Before my time.
this was way before you're sporting this look. And I looked at her, and she smiled at me, and she reached down, and she opened like a piece of like the leather flap that she had of her buckskin. And in it, I could see a heart, but it wasn't like a heart, like, we see it from an anatomy standpoint. It was a crystallized heart. And she reached into it, and it was completely crystal. So when she reached in and she took it out, it shimmered all these colorful rainbows, and looked at me, and she put it into my heart. Mm-hmm. And that was like one of the things. And I remember it so vividly because it was such a surreal, beautiful moment. And Emma was able to guide me and walk me through that, to get that form of healing from like our ancestors. But yet I had to go through almost this burial ground to get to there. And that was all my emotions that I had stored, the fear, the anxiety, the trauma, the losses, the lack of love, coming from a family filled with love and stuff. But on the other side of that was all the love that I ever needed, and it was gifted to me. So that was one of our many sessions.
Well, it's amazing. One of the things that I find fascinating, because this sounds like something we would do if you were, taking some psychedelics, or I know that Carlos Castaneda back in the day, in The Power, in his books, he would talk about how he would take peyote to reach these places, and people do ayahuasca, and there's many places and many things we can do. What I've learned is tapping into your imagination is like a treasure trove. There's so much in it. Like when you symbolize, like even the word bear is like, there's some things we can't bear. We can't bear because it keeps us like in that fear mode. So of course the bear would have to be giant and blocking your ability to see your heart, to find your heart. And so when I listen to these stories and listen to your words, that's what I mean. It takes on double meanings. And most of us, we don't go past that. We surrender to the fact that I'm so afraid, I'm so terrified. If we just what the heck? Let's do it anyway, because we're petrified and terrified on a daily basis. But to use your imagination, because as a kid, I remember as a kid, I wasn't afraid of a lot of things until a human would teach me how to be afraid of things. As a kid, I had, like I could go anywhere, I can close my eyes, I could fly. And so when I do this work and you're laying on the table, there's even a place like when you're, say you're seeing a therapist of sorts, you're sitting side by side and you're, talking to each other. But sometimes we're in our defenses because we're not sure what to say. But when you lay your body down, you are into your senses. And that transports and, like erases everything else, because you can close your eyes and you can follow your train of thought. And a lot of our thoughts are silly, like, silly things will pop up. But then if you keep allowing yourself and trusting yourself to have those images, you start to find the treasures. And like a rabbit hole or like a box that you said was buried, all those emotions that you were afraid of, I'm afraid of, or we were afraid of, that there comes a time where you're tired of being afraid, or you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. So let's do this work. And this is not on the normal spectrum. It's becoming more and more. But back then, how many years ago? 18 years? 20 years?
Came out.
That you came to me.
Yeah, when I was 5, I started with her. Probably I would say like 2005, between 2005 and 2007.
So that's like 18 years. Well, I don't know how many.
10, 13 years.
Yes.
She keeps adding years. I'm like, we're not that old.
Well, I'm okay with that. But the fact that
I haven't come to terms with the clock turning.
This is why I'm here, and you had already seen me being your elder back in the day, so I'll accept that. But the beauty of this, even with time, that we end up looking back, I end up looking back and thinking of all the things that I was so afraid of when life is waiting for us. We were talking about just live, how do we just want to live? But we have all these things, and a lot of them were conditional. A lot of them, like I was afraid to get married. I mean, marriage was the last thing I was going to do, even though I already had 2 daughters at 19.
Oh, wow.
But what was I afraid of? It was what I saw that turned me off. My parents were very physical and abusive, and physically abusive to one another. So I used to want to run away from them because they were always fighting. But as a little kid, I didn't know how to run away. I mean, what do? You have no money, no car. I mean, you're just a little kid. So I created this escape. And I went into a walk-in closet, and I thought, well, if they discover that I ran away, maybe they'll stop fighting, right? Because they're going to look for me. But of course they didn't. I stayed in this little closet. But in that closet, when I fell asleep, I went somewhere. I went somewhere so peaceful, so beautiful and quiet, because I came from a noisy place. And today, all these years later, my office, every office I ever had, was once a closet.
Oh my goodness.
A linen closet, what do you call it, vacuum closet, some kind of closet. And I laugh about that because I still can now close my eyes and just go somewhere. So when you came and brought your particulars, whatever they were at the time, it was like, I was all excited, and I know you were afraid. It's better to go to someone who's enthusiastic about helping and guiding than to go somewhere where someone's afraid too.
Right. Yes. I think you're right, because that, when I came, much like many of the women of the Cinderella group,
yes,
we were all seeking. We knew, like for me personally, going back to what you said, I didn't know what happiness was because I didn't have a happy childhood. My father was killed when I was 7.5 months old, which altered my whole perception of men and relationships much later on. So even though, you could say, oh, well, I didn't know him very, like, you know, was it really a void in my life because I never had it? You know, I never had that. But then you grow up and you see all your friends and all your cousins and all your relatives having fathers, and you know that you're missing something. So then there's that void. But I also had no real tangible role model to see these things, you know, and then so I spent a lot of my years depressed as a child, and my mom was manic depressive. She took my father's death very hard. She was 17 when she had me, so she was 18 by the time he died. And you know, I went to go live with my grandmother, and so I was a child who was not just taken and stripped by one parent, but both of their parents, because of this tragic event that I was way too young to even, you know what was going on. And it was never really explained, because at that point in time, I don't think that there was much put into child psychology. Yeah, now I'm giving away my age. I was born in 1901. No, but but I didn't know what happiness was. So how do you look for something? You know, I knew what unhappiness was. I knew how to identify with what it meant to be unhappy, but I didn't know how to measure happiness. I didn't know what happiness looked like. I only had this perception of what society put on you to be happy. You know, this is what happiness means. This is what you do to be happy to this outside world. So, you know, even in therapy, it took me a long time. I knew I was seeking, but I didn't have the tools, and I didn't know where to go to find the internet, like in 2005, 2007, it was not what it is today. You know, there are not as many books on spirituality and psychology, you know, before 2000 to the level that there is today. Today, you can be an agoraphobic, and I could get a remote job, and I can, you know, work from home, buy all my stuff from the internet, and have everything delivered. Back then, to seek meant you had to physically go out and seek and try to find something that didn't really exist in terms of modality, you know, and alternate medicine and therapy. So to find somebody who did healing work or shamanic work or past life regressions and things like that wasn't also really well accepted into mainstream like it is today. And I think that, you know, all the stuff that they're calling New Age is really a form of ancient modalities or indigenous practices on spirituality. So because we talk a lot about different mental health topics, can you just talk to us a little bit about, you know, the spiritual aspect and how important that is to our mental health? Because we only see mental health, many people only see mental health as just it being the mind.
Yeah, and I think that's what happens when you're a little kid, and as you're watching through the lenses, through the eyes of a young person who doesn't even know how to articulate what it feels or what it's experiencing. So without conversation, and this to me is key, when you're a little kid and you watch something happen, especially if you're traumatized by something, and no one talks about it, because back in the day, they didn't talk about things. It was always it's a family secret. So we kept that secret inside of us, and then we invented a story. We all have stories until one day you grow up and you're an adult and you can unravel the story. But meanwhile, we're running scared because that story follows us everywhere we go. And we tell the story over and over again as if that's who we are, right? That's where we come from. And one day you grow up and you find out that there's more to life than that story, or the pieces that weren't making any sense at all, but we created it. So that creativity is so awesome when you bring it into contemporary times. Spirituality has always been, you know, like something in me. I call it God. A lot of people call it spirit. But I remember being a really, really small kid and always talking to somebody or something was talking to me, and I would come in the house and my mother would say, "Oh, you have an imaginary friend." I said, "No, it's God." And she's like, "Ay, mija, be quiet, because people are going to think that's kind of strange if you're not in church." But it's been my go-to, and I think I even invented my God. I remember very young wanting to be pleasing, not to my mom and dad, because they were having their own disputes, but I always felt like there was someone watching me. So I would get dressed. I mean, to this day, I get dressed up because I think, just in case.
Just in case God shows up at your door.
Yeah, or somebody's watching, or, whatever, heaven forbid, put lipstick on it. But it was like such a beautiful thing that I had this. And I could walk through this, I lived in East LA in the projects for a while, and I would walk and I'd be talking to this energy. But it was always there. And if my parents were having their issues or the world was having issues, I would always come to God and just pray instantly, like, please guide me, please help me. And then when cancer came into my life, it was there at my disposal. I remember the doctors, giving me my diagnosis, and I went into a Charlie Brown mode of wah, 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 wah. I couldn't hear a word they were saying, but at the same time, this energy was telling me, listen to me. And I'm like, what? So I started to do that because my life depended on it, right? Mm-hmm. So in doing that, when people come to me, I know they have a voice too. Most of us get confused that it's religion. My mother was a religious person, but at the end of her life, her lung cancer, she called me in and she said, "You're going to teach me how to talk to God." And I was like, what? But I did. And I would look around her walls and she had all these icons and pictures and saints, and I didn't even wear a crucifix at that time. And I was like, but she knew that out of all her children, I was the one that was going to help her transition and also be able to. And she must have known on her way out that I already had it on the inside. So I know this for me. It's been my go-to. I believe that everybody has some form of spirituality. You know whose you are, you know where you come from, but because there's religion, and then there's families, and then there's atheists, and there's non-believers, we get caught up in the turmoil of all of that, trying to figure it out. But to me, that divinity, that God, that spark of divinity that lives in me and everyone, it's very personal. It's like love. It's like marriage. It's like relationships. If you compare yourself to someone else's relationship, which is what I did, and that's why I didn't want to get married ever. And now I perform weddings, and I've been married 37 years. So yeah, okay, Emma, whatever you say. But once I came to that, I found out that what I didn't understand was love. Spirituality and love to me are like the two best things I could hold on to and know. But I had to find it out for myself. What does it mean to me? Like, happiness to you isn't the same thing as happiness to another person. Right? A cup of coffee, I think that's why we always drink, or a cup of tea or whatever it is that we drink, just makes us happy. Just that little, having our cup full.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a whole other topic of what does happiness mean, yes. Because I never experienced happiness before. I only knew that I was unhappy. Mm-hmm. So I equated and measured happiness as something that was outside of myself. Mm-hmm. So you said something very interesting that I want to bring up. You said love. So what is love?
Okay. Love is it's gonna make me cry. See, just saying it, right? But it's an emotion that is across the board. And the only way I can explain it is at my 35th wedding anniversary, because I couldn't believe I was married. Because I was taught or I told myself I never wanted to be married. And I was already married 35 years. And my husband told me on that day, he says, I'm going to thank our entire family. And I said, please, whatever you do, don't ask me to say anything because I'm a mess. I'm a mess. And of course, he's talking and he gets nervous and he turns over the microphone to me. And I was like, I told you, don't ask me, because I was, crying. I was crying. I was emotional. And all our grandkids are sitting there, it was our family. And I looked at it and I said, this is what love looks like. And they're all looking like, what? When love has its way with you, you will know it. It feels to the depth that you love everything and everybody. Even if you don't like their behaviors, even if you don't like their hair, there is a love that transcends so much that when you get it, it's across the board. You can feel it. Now, bring it home to ourselves is another thing.
Right.
How do we love all that stuff that we did? It's exactly what we do. We turn to, it's over there. It's our past. But when the past catches up with you, you look at it and you love onto it. I love you. I forgive you. And there's just something about the Ho'oponopono or no-pono, whatever it's called, that when you say, I forgive you, please forgive me, it just melts away. And that's what you saw when you saw your Cinderella co-person. And you said, I don't know what it is, but she was glowing.
Yeah, she was glowing. She looked happy. She looked like the envision and embodiment of what you would imagine happiness to be. It was an exuding that state of being, which is what I now associate happiness with.
Yes.
Happiness is not something outside of myself. It's something that's within myself. I'm not a morning person. I hate mornings, but I get up in the morning and I'm very happy to have my once in the morning cup of coffee. And when I'm drinking that cup of coffee, I am in a state of happiness because I love that coffee. And it's hard to, it's hard to imagine, oh, you love coffee, but it is the reason that I look forward to getting up in the morning. If I have to get up early, oh, I'm gonna have my cup of coffee. It's a treat. This is what makes my morning so special. And you also said something about, the voices. And
Yes.
as someone who suffered from panic disorder, I was my own bully. I had been bullied so much because we moved at least twice a year. So I was always in new schools. I was always the new kid. I kept getting bullied, and I didn't know how to defend myself. I didn't know how, I didn't have tools on how to fight off these bullies. But each of them preyed on the vulnerability, and maybe the fact that I was this sort of innocent child who suffered from depression. It was like they could pick up these things, like knowing that I wasn't going to defend myself. And when you have this person from this school or this city telling you that you're ugly or you're not good enough and nobody loves you, and then you go to a new school 6 months later and those are the same words that you hear, how many times you have to get beaten down before you start believing it? And once that I believed it, then that inner voice started knocking me down. But like you, I also had that voice who, in the most random of times, I would hear this voice inside me saying, get into the next lane. And then you see, 30 seconds later, a car coming crashing where I was 30 seconds before. Can you maybe talk a little bit to anybody who might be watching this? How do we differentiate the different voices, and how do we tap into and listen to that voice that is our sort of higher source or our higher power or God, spirit factor?
That's an interesting question, because I was asked that so many years ago, because I have a tendency to say God said. God told me. And I'll stick by it because it's been my go-to. It's been everything that I am. It works for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but it works for me. And once this person asked me the same question you're asking me, and she said, how do you know that's God's voice and not your voice?
I've been one of those people who go, really, God talked to you? Huh? What did God say? Not because I don't believe, but because I'm curious.
But I'm going to give you my little short version of how I know the difference. When humans speak, they go into a rendition. It's a song and dance. It's from beginning to end, and it has all these words in it to describe whatever. When God speaks, it's like one sentence, one word. Absolutely. It's just one, and you feel it. It's so different than my human voice as it is my spiritual voice. It's a higher frequency. It is deliberate. You feel it and you act on it.
Right.
This is why, I'm so disciplined when I know the difference between my craziness and voices or my mother's voice or whoever's voice. When it's God, it just is. I got a text and it was very painful. And I said, God, how do I respond to this? What do I say to this? And it said the best response is none. What? And yet when I felt it was so right. I didn't have to understand it. But when I felt it, everything in my body just melted. I mean, like drained from reacting to wanting to argue and fight back, or like put down the sword and let it go. It was so, and I get things like that, because there's a part of us, a part of me that wants to come out, we think we're badass. You gotta, hit somebody back with some words, or I got the answer, or we don't let other people finish their sentence because we know what to say. Nah, now I'm just like, okay, just let it go, just listen and learn. And
Right.
This voice is so beautifully and so calm that, when people ask me, I work at a church, so we're always getting people who want prayers and prayers and prayers and prayers. And I'm busy with people on the table too, and I'll take the ones I can respond. And as I'm reading the prayer request, is as if I'm already answering it. Like I'm done. Just reading this, my heart, my mind goes into like sending that energy to that person who's having surgery or, dealing with some kind of, situation in their life. Just my intention, just my love, just by opening up that email and reading it, and then I don't even have to answer it with words. And
Right.
Sometimes, because it's too much, I delete it.
That's a good way to
Save
get
yourself.
rid of it. Save yourself the trouble. Just ignore it.
But Spirit gets it. Spirit gets it. I come from a place where, you have to pray for 30 days. And I was like, don't you think God gets it in one request?
Yes. It's the humans that beat ourselves up.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm so excited that you came today to talk with us, and you have so much more knowledge to give. And of course, I'm going to put ways in which to contact you or suggestions and stuff down below. But and maybe in leaving and in passing, for someone who is suffering from anxiety and they're lost or they don't know where to turn to, maybe you can leave us with what is a technique or a modality that we could use just to tap into that source energy, that spiritual energy, to get us out of our head and back into our spirit.
Okay. I think the best thing that has been working for me, and I suggest it to all my clients, is whenever you're having emotion, close your eyes and allow the emotion to just be the emotion. And then imagine that emotion as if it was another person walking into this room and that person said, I have anxiety. What would you say? How would you help? What direction? When I have anxiety, and this is me, I close my eyes and I remember where my anxiety started. And I remember, it looks like it goes back and forth, like it's trying to run away, trying to escape. And I'll just try to calm it down by like, tell me what I can do to help you. And my anxiety says, what? You're gonna help me? It's like, yes, I can help you. Because now I have means, now I'm a grown person. And I'm listening to that little person who had anxiety when she was small and had no escape, no means. And this is my anxiety speaking to me as you allow your anxiety to speak to you. She says, can we go swimming? And we do. It's been the place where I found my divinity. It's been the place that I go to. Swimming is my church, a pool, water, the ocean. I found my sanctuary there as opposed to a church. I used to go to church as a kid, Bible school, because I was trying to look for God in a book. And one day across the street in East LA at Pecan, they created a swimming pool and it said, junior lifeguard sign up. And the day that I dove into that pool, the illuminating water just brought tears to my eyes. And it said, I said, God, this is where you've been? So, unbeknownst to me, I find that God is everywhere you are. There's no spot where God is not. So if your church is the forest, it's the ocean, it's the water, it's your backyard, it's a pool, then go there. Because the rest is religion. And nothing's wrong with religion, but spirituality is personal. And so when you have pain and you have it over and over again, treat it as if you were its best friend. What would you do?
Well, just when you were speaking, I closed my eyes, and when you were saying, and I saw, I don't know why my anxiety is a man, but it was a man.
It could be.
And he was kind of more like a silhouetted, shadowy man,
Yes.
And when you said, what would you do if you saw it? I just gave him a hug.
Right.
And he disappeared. So I know it's like metaphorically, symbolically, but even though symbolic, your brain has no idea that man who represented anxiety was not standing there.
But it becomes a chemical reaction. What was scary is now liquefied and it just melts, right? Because you embrace this part of you. And, we can go on and on about the anxiety of seeing that man or the boogeyman. Remember, we all have one of those. But once you are grown, once you're a woman, once you have, the ability to think for yourself, then you can approach it as if it were a real thing, not just a word, but we gave it a form. And from that form, you can do something with it. And most of the time, all it wants you to do is love it.
Yeah,
Even
the
the
opposite
scariest
side of fear is love.
Love, right? So let's all move in that direction. Be playful, because it may sound a little crazy, but it's playful. And you laugh at the stuff that used to almost kill you.
Yeah.
Or threaten you. But then somehow we survive and it wants us to live. Remember, the opposite of evil is live.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your words of wisdom. We love having you. I love having you around, Sarah. I know anybody watching will love your spirit and nature and state of being. And you're just an amazing person who's helped thousands of people overcome their suffering. So thank you.
And thank you, because together we were pioneers even then. And now we have so many people who are doing their modalities. And I'm not for everyone. Most people are referred to me by word of mouth. And I finally realized in 26 years, I've been okay. Referrals, 26 years of referrals. So I'm good, but I have faith. And that's another reason things come to me. So thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to your audience. Thank you, Shauna. I just feel like you're one of my own mijas.
Yeah,
you know.
You were like my spiritual mother, so I appreciate you.
Or your fairy godmother if you're a Cinderella.
That's my broken princess. Thank you so much.